Kia ora everyone, this is Stephen Moe, the organizer of these impact calls. I'm holding them every month, and if you'd like to join in on them, there's about 650 people who get the notifications, and at yesterday's call there was about 70 people watching. But you get to watch the Zoom video of Sue, Michelle, and Kaye Maree sharing. Next month we're going to be having Maria English from the Impact Lab, as well as Kirsten Patterson from the IOD. So if you'd like to join in on those, then drop me a line. In the meantime, let's have a listen to this video call, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, well, kia ora koto. It's great to see you all here. Tēnā koto katoa, no America aho, no te timatanga, ko te tai ta toku maunga, ko waitaki toku awa, ko ototahi toku kainga inaine, he roia toku tunga mahi o Perryfield Lawyers, ko Stephen mo toku ingoa, no reira ngā mihi kia koto katoa. Yeah, it's really great to welcome so many of you here on this call. I know there's real interest in our speakers, and I know that they've got some amazing things to say and share some of the research that they've been involved in and things that they're seeing. I'd like to acknowledge my team member in behind me, Sophie. So she's waving. She joined about a month ago, and we've got a growing team here. So it's great to be able to see all of you here as well. So we're going to hear from Sue, Michelle, and Kaye Maree in a minute. But I just thought, because quite a few of you, I think, haven't joined one of these calls before, just to give a little bit of background, they started about 2 years ago. So as we all remember, 2 years ago was the initial lockdown. And it became a chance for people to connect during that first lockdown every week. And it was quite regular, like every single Friday. But over time, I've realized that probably once a month is a good rhythm to get into. And the purpose behind it is that so often we end up talking with people who we already know, and we end up being in little silos across the entire, what I call the impact or purpose-driven sector. So the calls, what I'm really hoping is that it gets us out of our traditional groups, and you'll end up talking with someone who's involved with a youth charity or suicide prevention or rugby club or whatever it is. And each of us on this call, I think you can universally say that we're involved in impact in some way. And so I find it really, really encouraging to see all of you here doing what you're doing, the mahi that you're doing. So that's really the intention, is to kind of bring up a focal point where we can learn from each other. And as well as that, we get to hear from some speakers. So this month, we're going to be hearing from Sue from Philanthropy New Zealand, from Michelle from Fundraising Institute of New Zealand, and then Kaye Maree Dunn talking about the podcast she's been involved in by Community Research. So I want to welcome them. After they've spoken, we will, for whoever has time, we'll also be having some breakout room sessions. So that's a chance for you to potentially get to actually meet people and talk with another human, because I don't want this just to be like a passive watching experience. And on that line, the chat function, you've all been using it now to tell me where you are and the weather in your location. So if you have questions for one of the speakers, then feel free to use the chat to ask questions. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand straight over to Sue. Sue, we'd love to hear from you some of the things that are going on from Philanthropy New Zealand perspective. And I know that you've got some exciting developments in terms of a new program which is launching. So I'm just going to pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Tēnā koutou. So yes, I'm Sue from Philanthropy New Zealand, and in a very, as people have said, a very windy and wet Wellington, but our thoughts are with people in other parts of the country and all the disruption that weather is causing, particularly up Tairāwhiti way. I know there's some Lily joining us from that region and maybe some others. So today I am going to be quite focused about what I'm talking about, which is Match Kapuna Taurite, which is a new service for philanthropists and grant makers to connect with community and charitable groups. And the website that gives a bit more information will be going live next week, and then the service will be open for use in mid-April. So I guess there's two kind of user groups on this platform. There's the funders and the fund seekers, and I think we've mostly got fund seekers as the biggest group here today. So I'll focus more on that. Match the Puna Tauriti, it's for all registered charities. We know there's also a lot of non-registered groups doing really awesome work in communities, but we've just needed for the basic service and to get it set up and running, we've needed to stick with that registered charities group at this stage. And it particularly looks to support those working with Maree, Pacifica, Rainbow, new refugee and migrant and disability communities, and also those with fewer fundraising resources. So what it does is it provides fund seekers with an easy way to get in front of multiple funders at once by creating a profile and uploading one funding request or more than one funding request. Now it lets charities upload funding requests in the way that suits them. So, you know, you can write a few bullet points about yourself and about your funding request, or you can write screeds. You can reuse another funding application that maybe was unsuccessful or only partly funded. You can use video to communicate. So we've tried to keep it really flexible. And you can ask for any type of funding you want. So salaries or projects, you know, pay your electricity bills, etc., etc. So there's not like criteria. It's free for the smallest charities. We're using the government's tiered system. So it's free for, I'm trying to think whether it's, I've got a Friday brain. I think it's tier 4's the littlest ones that have got operating payments under 140K. So it's free for them. Then for the next tier, which if I've got it the right way around is tier 3, that is under, I think, 2 million. It's $60 a year, and there's also discounts if you sign up in the first couple of months. So that's a little bit about kind of who it's for. Just on the funder aspect quickly, it gives funders an easy way to find charities working in areas they want to support, because when you upload your funding requests, you put in whether it's you know, it's children, it's climate change, what region it's in, who you're trying to support. We've got a particular focus on charities who can identify maybe they're led by the people they serve, like Rainbow or new migrant refugees, which is part of the equity focus. So funders can find you easily, and I guess the aim is a more equitable, accessible and collaborative funding system. So equity is we want to see funding flowing to Maree, Pacifica, Rainbow, disability and ethnic communities, because anecdotally we hear that there's not sufficient funds going to those communities. Accessibility, which is a little bit linked with equity, but that small charities with little or no funding resource can get in front of philanthropists and grant makers on this service just as easy as the big ones. So this is for all registered charities, but you know, if a funder is searching, they're going to find anyone that comes up with which meets their kind of search criteria. And you know, we know at the moment, you know, what a lot of effort it is, because I've come from a background of fund seeking, to try and identify the funding sources out there and then read the criteria and then write the applications, etc., etc. And bigger charities are better resourced to be able to do that. So, you know, it's seeking a funding system where fewer resources are tied up in the funding process, which means more are available for delivering services that make a difference to communities. And that's for funders as well as fund seekers, fewer resources tied up in that kind of process of exchange. Just another couple of things to say. I mean, this is a service, I guess, that's been talked about for decades, because the problems in the funding system, you know, are quite complex and quite embedded and really, really hard to progress. And so some of those I've touched on, the resource required to raise the funds, inequity, the system's more accessible to those with more resources. And funders also are increasingly want to connect with each other to try and improve the system to support charities, so it'll enable easier funder connection. There is also an important thing that it will do, which is voice into the fund seeker voice, charity voice into the funding system. Because, you know, often we know that individual charities find it hard to sometimes provide feedback to a funder. And even in the process of development, we were just having a conversation yesterday with funders and also some peak community sector peak bodies, and some issues were raised and discussed around part funding. So I think that this service is really going to help us to have those conversations, but also kind of progress, I won't say solutions to them because they're really, really hard, but help to progress some of them. Another problem that's around, which it's not going to fix, is there's not enough funding. So there is overwhelming demand for philanthropic funds and grant making. So it's not going to fix that. However, we are hoping to reach a group of high net worth individuals that currently find it really hard to connect with charities that they care about, and the service will make it easier for them to do that. So just, I guess, in summary, we're just really grateful for all the help and support that we've had to get Match Te Puna Tauriti up and running. It's quite a complicated initiative. It takes a village, and we've got that village. We've got an amazing group of funders that have supported it right from the get-go. So we had, a funder a couple of years ago give us a small grant to be able to start discussing it, and then more funding to kind of explore the concept and test it, including with charities. And now we've got some seed funders who have given us support for 3 years to get it up and running. And I just, want to say, I know that this shows, the funders that are members of Philanthropy New Zealand, they really do care about making the system easier, and we do need kind of a system response like Match Te Puna Tauriti to allow us to make some of those gains. So the tricky thing about it is that in order to get users on the platform, we need to deliver value. We need to help you with your pain points right away, because we need sufficient users of the service in order to start shifting and making that kind of positive change. So it's got this practical aspect to it, and then it's got the strategic aspect. So if you are interested in being part of a more equitable, accessible and collaborative funding system, then please do go and diary it for mid-April to go and check out this platform. You can contact me. I'll put some details in the chat about how you can get on the newsletter and stuff like that. So we're trying to support charities, we're trying to support funders, and crazily, in order to do that, we also need kind of your input and your involvement and your voice in that process to get this right. So I think that's it from me. Back to you, Stephen.
That's really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think there's some questions in the chat, which maybe you can have a look at and answer to the best of your ability. I haven't been watching all of them. There's quite a few. But I also want to just say, this is a chance for us to get behind initiatives like this, these sort of positive initiatives. So when it does go live, it's a simple thing, but using our own networks and our own social media accounts and things, and spreading the word about good initiatives, like just a reminder that we can support these things as well. So Sue, well done to you and the team. That's really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops. I'm going to keep moving along, and again, you can put questions in the chat, and the person who's speaking will be able to say something. But Kaye, Maree, we'd love to hear from you, and really appreciate your joining. We met now a couple of years ago. I think it was at a social enterprise forum at the Wellington Zoo, of all places. But I've really appreciated the variety of things that you've been involved in, and really speaking into a number of different areas. And one of them that really intrigued me recently, and I binge listened to all of them, was this podcast, Korero. So we'd love to hear a little bit about that. And I know it has an initiative at thinking about the treaty and how that actually has impact in the mahi and the work that we're doing. So I'm going to hand over to you. Just would love to hear more about the background and what you're seeking to do with that podcast. Thank you.
Kia ora, Stephen, and kia ora tātou, and it's great to hear the update from Philanthropy New Zealand. Excuse me, I'm in a car. I have been in the Hokianga in the far north for the last few days. I'm heading back into Whangarei, so I'm in transit at the minute, but I really wanted to be part of this conversation, and thanks, Stephen, for opening it up for us. So my name is Kaye Maree Dunn, he uri ahau no Te Raroa, a Ngāpuhi Ngāti Kahu, Ngāti Mahanga Ngai Tāmanuhiri. I am the director of MEA, Making Everything Achievable, and I have been involved in a range of different initiatives and opportunities to grow and develop Māori enterprise, Māori businesses, Māori organisations, as well as prepare ourselves for, I guess, COVID and everything that's hit our communities over the last 2 years, and in particular providing advice and support for our communities as well, which has been very, very difficult and challenging. And so I guess with the conversation around funding and equity and opportunity, I thought it was a great time for us to think quite seriously around what is the nature of our relationships, what does that look like, and how might we build and develop a more meaningful way of connecting, relating, and developing opportunities for our people. So part of that has been a focus on te tiriti, which is not a new conversation. I think it's a really old one. He whakaputanga, which is the Declaration of Independence, which was signed in 1835. But really underlying it all is how do we make in 2022 sense of these agreements and promises between the Crown or the settler populations and Māori or iwi Māori, actually hapu Māori, if we look at the titi closely. And how do we also define those relationships today? And so in the work that we've been supporting in the social impact space, you know, we've really had to re-examine and look at the way that resource has been equitably distributed to support families in need. And in particular, before COVID hit, there has been a strong power imbalance between the provision of resource funding to iwi, usually had been wrapped around a contract for service. And I also believe that we've really struggled with the high level of trust that was needed really for the Crown to trust iwi Māori and community organisations to get on with the mahi that they needed to. And I mean, this won't be new conversation to any of you. This is really just reiterating what most community development practitioners are aware of. But what COVID taught us was that we had to deploy resource in a markedly different way. And of course, we were able to lean into the promises of Te Tiriti, which was about equity, partnership, collaboration, and actually look at ways where we couldn't kind of engage in long drawn out contract discussions because families were in need immediately. People needed water, they needed food, they needed urgent medical access, a whole lot of welfare needs, housing needs. So they were all magnified times 1,000. And then if we look at the dynamic, and I'm just kind of focusing in on the tribal entities of the North where we're working, we also have had really interesting interrelationships between tribes. So we haven't always gotten along. And sometimes, I guess prior to COVID, had very stormy discussions with each other, as you would with your relations. But COVID meant that that was the common enemy. That was a common enemy. That was the area that needed to be tackled. We didn't know what it was and what impact it would have, other than there was a strong likelihood that individuals, whānau Māori, were at the greatest risk of getting sick and getting hurt and dying as well. So what does this mean in practice was that organisations then started to look at, well, what can we do to help? And I really want to acknowledge Foundation North, who were a great organisation who just said, look, what is needed we'll just deploy resource. You as community decide what you need to do with it. And that was a great way. We're in a funding body, like Foundation North, recognised and understood, look, we've got resource, we will try and deploy it, you decide where it goes. And really all we require is a one-pager report. So they tried to make it as simple as possible. The way that the tribes actually decided to respond as well, because there needed to be a high level of coordination and organisation, was through the formation, or rather not the formation, but the reignition of the collective, which was called Te Kahu o Taonui. And Te Kahu o Taonui is a collective of 12 iwi entities of the North who came together to respond to COVID, but also to support each other as iwi chairs, and also look at how they were going to collectivize and deploy support, resource, communication across the whole Taitokero region. Now, if you think about the level of communication, connection, kind of putting away kind of old battle tools and focusing in on the joint enemy, it's actually been beautiful to watch. But then it meant that the Crown and all the agencies had to change the way that they were relating and connecting, because they were now dealing with a collective entity. They knew that they had to trust the entity to be able to deploy resource in the way that they saw fit, because iwi chairs and CEs made those decisions together. And they also had to ensure that that resource got out as quickly as possible. How does this relate back to Te Tiriti? Is because it was a real beautiful demonstration of treaty principles and practice. And I just want to highlight that because I think Te Kahu o Taonui is a magnificent example, but it's not the only example. Most Māori communities over this period of time, and if not all iwi, have had to shift the way that they operate. But I also think that our government partners and other philanthropic agencies and organisations had to find different ways of partnering and connecting so that we could have greater impact in the community. So that's that piece. Drilling down into the podcast and the purpose for it, which I hope might be useful, is we're working with community research to enable and empower the community sector to have access to conversations of Māori practitioners who have been using Te Tiriti in their practice. So, for example, we interviewed Dr. Kathy Irwin, who spoke as a researcher and an evaluator, but also as a practitioner inside the Retirement Commission, and how she was using Te Tiriti as a way of revitalising and helping that organisation to change the way that they were working in partnership with Māori. And again, at the core of it was about the transfer of power and decision making, and trusting those their Māori partners to do the things that they needed to serve their people's needs. We had Dr. Chelsea Groupveld, who talked about how she was conscientised and shifted her knowledge from working inside of government to then apply treaty principles to her work as an evaluator, kaupapa Māori evaluator. But again, the same theme of identifying how communities needed to be empowered and supported to be heard, and for their thinking to form the basis of the design of services and solutions that best suited them. We had Mike Smith, who spoke as an activist. Actually, no, not an activist, because that's a term that other people put upon him. He is a grandfather, he's a fisherman, and he's passionate about his community, equity and justice. And for him, he was really thinking quite hard around how does Te Tiriti feature, or the fact that actually so many people kind of are busy navel gazing and not actually getting on with the mahi at hand, and how important it was for communities to develop climate change and community development solutions that were by Māori for Māori but supported by all. And I guess his kind of critical challenge for all of us was, you know, are we stuffed in regards to where the climate's sitting at the moment? So that's a real big challenge that he put forward in that korero. And then finally, we spoke with Ali Hamlin Painga. I mean, she spoke about the application of Te Tiriti in her role as the chief executive of Kahungunu Social Services, and the challenges that she's facing, not only in trying to advocate for support for the work that they're doing, because they're dealing with the hard edge of whānau need, whānau experiencing homelessness, mental health crises, critical issues in Wellington City, which was magnified during COVID. And so how does the treaty and the principles apply to families that are just struggling to make ends meet, who don't even have bread and butter? So how do you talk about Te Tiriti? And so for her, it wasn't about the korero, it was about ensuring that their mana was always intact in their practice, that they would always work to hear them, work with them, and ensure that her role was to advocate hard for the Crown to support them to do what they needed to do. And she was quite unique because although they are called Kahungunu Social Services or Kahungunu Whānau Services, many of the Māori that they serve, may also be the same for many of the listeners here, are whānau who were not of Ngāti Kahungunu origin. And plus Ngāti Kahungunu have tribal links into Wellington City, but of course they're not mana whenua. And so when you've got those interesting dynamics to contend with, how do you still ensure that the Crown will give you space? Because at the moment, the treaty relationship is often heralded between iwi and the Crown. But then we also have whānau, just other communities, tautāhere, which are other whānau that come from different tribal origins that are living in different locations. And so how do we better serve them, and how do we advocate for them, but also ensure that the mana and integrity of the local people is also not diminished? So she was fantastic. So in summary, I'd really love to encourage your team here, Stephen, to listen to the podcast. We've been lucky to partner with the amazing team led by Dr. Heather Kaye, who has been hosting a series of Te Tiriti and anti-racism conversations. And it's pretty full on. It's like, I don't know, 12 hours worth of interviews and Zoom calls and korero every day. And I believe either today or next week, they've got a 12-hour Pecha Kucha session where they've got young researchers talking about the impact of, or their reflections on Te Tiriti, and also research around anti-racism and some of the practical work that they're doing. So we'll be picking up 10 of those conversations and adding them to the list of podcasts through He Korero. And our aim is to enable all groups to be able to listen, reflect, and apply some of the teachings of these practitioners, but also for you to have space to think to yourself, how am I going to make sense of Te Tiriti within my own organisation, within my own staff, and also in the work that we're delivering here in Aotearoa. And then there's the broader conversation, which is what does nation building look like in a post-COVID, in this new reality that we're facing today. Ōrere hoa mā, mauri ora kia tātou. Thank you very much for your time. If you've got any questions, feel free to fire them through.
It's awesome. Thank you so much, Kaye Maree. I really appreciate it, especially since you're on the road. Yeah, I was actually stacking wood while I listened to it for probably, I think it must run for about 4 hours or so total, and really learned a lot because they were really raw and honest conversations as well. I really appreciated the quality of it as well. So thank you very much for sharing. I'd encourage you all. I put the link in the chat so that you can find it. It's in Apple Podcasts and Spotify and those sorts of places. But there is a link that's there in the chat. So again, this is just good. It's good to hear about what other people are doing, and maybe it wasn't on your radar and now it can be. I'm going to switch gears again. And the point of these calls, for those who've joined since we started, is to hear from diverse people. about what they're involved in. And I think it's a really important thing to do, because sometimes we're so busy on the detail of our day-to-day answering emails and making calls that we forget that there's other people doing some good stuff out there. So we're going to switch over. Michelle, we'd love to hear about the Fundraising Institute of New Zealand and some of the research that you've been doing. Over to you.
Kia ora. Well, the two amazing women to follow, Kia ora, Kaye, Maree and Sue. That was wonderful to hear from you both. So I'm here today from the, my name's Michelle Berriman, who, for those that don't know me, and I'm the Executive Director of the Fundraising Institute of New Zealand. And over the last couple of years, like many organisations, our kind of what we do has slightly changed, and we've taken time to review our strategy and our vision and our mission. And I think our new vision, that everyone in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is empowered and inspired to give generously and confidently to causes that they care about, is probably the same vision that we all have here today in this room. And so as we don't just represent fundraisers. I think we are looking at, especially some of the mahi we've been doing around the demise of cheques, is kind of wider sector impact. And over the last 18 months, we've been working on gift and wills research. This research came about many years ago. Most countries have what's called an Include a Charity programme, which encourages everyone to leave a legacy in their gift. And we had a project where we had Include a Charity here until about 2017, and that's been paused for the last few years. And so the idea was that there was no reliable baseline New Zealand data to measure the success of an IAC campaign. And there was always a nagging thought that New Zealand circumstances and culture could be actually quite different when it comes to giving a gift and leaving a gift in your will. And so we wanted to understand the unique barriers and enablers to leaving a gift in your will, as well as understanding through data and market analysis, the actual penetration of legacy giving in New Zealand to establish a proper benchmark. So I think this isn't just a fundraising or a charity thing. This is actually a societal thing. And we know that globally, through having Include a campaign in countries, it increases it substantially. I don't want to give too much of the information out about the actual research that's coming out next week, but we know that through a campaign, you can more than double, in Canada and overseas, the prevalence is plus 10%, it kind of doubles off the back of a campaign. So we've got a baseline. We know currently how many people leave a gift in their will. And this information is significant. Like I said, it's not just for fundraisers or for charities. It can be used to influence government, commerce, trusts, foundations, institutions, and ultimately everyday Kiwis. We want to affect change and create an environment where leaving a charitable legacy and making a gift in your will is the norm. And I think there's perceptions that in order to leave a gift to a charity, you've got to be old or rich. And this research has proven that it's not. Our youngest confirmed bequester was 28 and has left a gift and will to charity. And again, we hear about the $1 million gifts, the big gifts, but actually the gifts are just $1, $2, $3, $4, $5,000, whatever. The gift is not about how much you give, it's about the act of giving. So this research is coming out next week, and it looked at, it was to the level of awareness and knowledge about leaving a gift. What was the gaps? What were the perceptions? But more importantly, what was the motivations? What's the process of thinking when you leave a gift in the will? And identifying key situations. We know, for example, from this study that during COVID, 1 in 4 people has actually updated or changed their will. COVID was, it made death a reality for many people, and alongside maybe having children or children leaving home or grandchildren, all of these lifetime things that happen to you are triggers for assessing your will. We also have very strong findings on the percentage of people who have already left a gift in their will to charity, the impacts COVID had and on the wills, reasons why people leave a gift, and the reasons why people don't have a will, which is surprising. There's a surprising amount of people that don't have a will. And what is really unique about New Zealand that we've identified is the prevalence of family trusts. 26% of people who are leaving a gift in their will are involved in a family trust. And globally, that is actually really, really high. So all of these things, if you've got an organization, even if you don't have a huge fundraising strategy or a fundraising team, every person that you have a relationship with is potentially is someone that will leave a gift. We know that people leave a gift in their will because they have a personal connection and they want to support that cause. They want to be remembered for how much they loved your cause when they're gone. And so by putting it in their will, they're telling their family that this organization was super important to me when I was alive, and I want it to be remembered when I pass. And it's about making the conversation of death and what you want something that we embrace. It's a living document. It's not something to be afraid of. And I think this can add, I think our research will add a lot of, it will provide a lot of opportunities to start those conversations and understand people's motivations or barriers to giving. So that's coming out next week. I do just want to finish on one project that we're about to go into in the next couple of months, and that is to increase awareness and address bullying, discrimination, sexual harassment in the non-for-profit sector. It's a huge piece of work we want to do. And we know that it's been reported that as many 1 in 5 Kiwi workers and volunteers have or are affected by bullying, discrimination, sexual harassment and inequality. We know everywhere. And although we know it's prevalent, it's rarely discussed. And we know it's taken place in plain sight. And so we want to put together a working group. We're in conversations with the Ministry for Women, who are incredibly, we've got their attention around the mahi that we want to do. We want to understand how to identify behaviours that may unintentionally perpetuate the cycle of bullying, intimidation, sexual harassment, sexual discrimination and discrimination. And we want to bring together as many people as possible. And this is where I'm hoping this group will be able to help. We are just leading this project. We have no agenda at FINS. We have no perceived outcomes. We want to, very similar to what we did with the Czech working group, we want to pull together everyone that should be around the table at the beginning to create a collaborative, community-led approach. There's, like I said, there's no agenda, and we want to reach and include as many communities as we can, giving everyone the opportunity to be heard, included and listened to. We're going to tackle the hard questions, but it will be a safe, anonymous channel to share and be heard. And we want to seek the right answers that will support all of our communities to call out discrimination and create equality across communities. It's so important that everyone doing the mahi is looked after. We know that if we look after, you know, that as fundraisers, we look after our donors, but actually at FINS, and we strongly feel that somebody needs to support the people doing the work and make sure they're safe and that they're looked after and that they can thrive in order to do the job. So we want to empower communities to speak out and address the silent discrimination and bullying, and leading to better equality and improved and equitable decision making. So if anyone is interested in joining the group, I know we've got HUIE, Volunteer New Zealand, the Ministry for Women, and I've been talking to Sue at Philanthropy New Zealand. Before we launch this project, we really want to have a good set of people, and I know there's diverse communities that I would love their advice and to be part of this mahi. And I think it's not going to be a short campaign, but we're hoping to create a framework that really will make an impact, and it'll be driven by those that are part of the working group.
So awesome. Thank you so much. That's great. So much quality stuff going on. Well done. Is that just a question in the chat? I'll ask it because I think lots of us may be wondering it. That research that you're mentioning, is that something that people will be able to access even if they're not a member of FINS?
Yes, definitely this part. Yes, we will be launching an IAC campaign, which will be member-based campaign, but this research is super important for everyone. So if you jump on the website and send us your email address, the report will be going out at the end of next week and will be accessible for all. We're also doing a free webinar, which will deliver the insights and practical, tangible actions from the research on, I think, about the 17th of April. Again, that's free to register on our website.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, well, I put the website as a link in the chat, so hopefully you can all click and get
Stephen.
access to it easily. And I know, Michelle, you're very approachable. All of the speakers are very approachable. I'm sure that you welcome people writing with questions or particularly around the second part that you were talking on, the bullying and things. So yeah, that sounds like a great initiative. And Michelle, we actually just sat down to record a podcast about this research and what it means, but also about your life story. because some of you may know I do a podcast interviewing inspiring people across the country. So that episode is coming out pretty soon for Seeds podcast. So thank you everybody for joining. I'm not shutting the meeting down right now, but what we're going to move towards is a chance to have some breakout rooms. So this is kind of a chance, and I know many of you are going to need to leave. You've got other commitments and things, or you just don't want to join a breakout room, which is fine. But it's a chance to really connect with somebody else, because Zoom is amazing, technology is great, but it can feel a little bit impersonal and, watching, like the TV. So that's why I try at the end of these calls to have a little bit of a chance for a human interaction, just so it's clear. That's why I'm making the effort to do that. So if you're not interested in that, maybe drop off now. But for those of you who are here still, next month, it's a monthly thing. So it should be in your diaries. If it's not there, then let me know and I can forward the meeting invite. But I've asked KP or Kirsten Pedersen from the IOD to speak. So she's going to be sharing about their leadership conference and some of the things that the Institute of Directors is doing. So that's going to be really interesting. And again, the purpose of these calls is to hear from diverse voices that you might not hear from otherwise. So KP will share, and then Maria English from Impact Lab is going to be sharing about the work that they're doing. And so that's some important things that they're involved in terms of measuring impact. So I think it's really going to be of interest to those on the call. And I would really ask a favor, which is this sort of a thing only happens because people like you tell other people. It's very much a word of mouth thing. So if you've enjoyed the chat today, you've learned something, then feel free to forward on emails I send or let people know about it, because that's how people find out. And this is all recorded, so I'll send a link to the session so that you'll be able to then forward it on to other people who might have missed it, but maybe would appreciate what we had to say. So thank you so much, Sue, Michelle, and Kaye Maree. I really appreciate your insights, your input. It was awesome. Hopefully you can get access to what they're doing through the website and keep up to date. It's kind of an exciting time, though, that there is so much good research to and new initiatives that maybe will support this sector, which, let's be honest, it's been a hard couple of years. So it's great to see these positive things going on. Yeah, really happy about that. So what we're going to do now, for those of you who remain, I'm going to send you to breakout rooms, and I'm going to just hit pause on recording.